Good evening. What's going on there, guys? It's the Earthmaster here, along with another update here on this Sunday night. It is August 28th, 2022. It's about 8:24 p.m. California time. Latest quake shows a 1.0 earthquake up into the region of Alaska. All right, we're going to jump into the space weather activity right off the bat because things are definitely still continuing to pick up here along the area of that topic. Including quite a few solar flares ramping up here over the last week or so. Quite a few M flares kicking up. And most of them have been coming from the departing sunspot, which is now 3088, kind of saying goodbye here on the southwestern limb of the sun. It is producing some awesome features there from that solar sunspot area. But we kind of turning our focus right now towards a new well, not a new sunspot, but a growing sunspot, and it is facing the Earth right now. This is the one of the sunspots that produced a M7 here a couple days ago, but we are lined up a little bit more to get more of a direct impact here on Earth when it comes to the direct connection there with the flare. And it is growing. It's developing into a pretty awesome magnetic class here. That is 3089 here. This will be rotating into view, and it's almost certainly Earth directed right now. But anything that does pop off will definitely be geo-effective. 3088, again, is way on the other side here, southwestern limb. And I don't think anything's going to pop off there. Well, at least Earth-directed, that is. It's still continuing to be pretty active. But this bad boy right here has a pretty awesome magnetic class kicking up right now. 3089 does hold a beta-delta class. That means it's growing, and these are the classes that do produce potential X flares. So look at all the sunspots, or the difference in colors up here. A lot of complex magnetic field stuff going on here, so to speak. And speaking of that, someone asked me the different types of magnetic fields and classification. So I'm going to run over this real quick. I'm not going to read everything. I'm going to include this here in the description below on this update video, but there's a lot. There's alpha, beta, gamma, a whole bunch of different classes. In fact, 8 of them. And then more than half of the observed sunspots receive an alpha or the beta classification. The bigger sunspots that we're witnessing right now with 3089 are often more complex and get a beta gamma or beta gamma delta classification. And those are the type that can be very active and produce the most intense solar flares. There's a pretty cool article that spaceweatherlive.com put out in regards to the magnetic classification of sunspots, and I suggest you check it out. Right now, 3089 posing a 5% risk for an X flare, although I think that is growing as we speak. This did produce an M7.2 and an M5.3, so those are the noteworthy events. But there's been quite a few more M flares that has been producing, that has happened, over the last 3 or 4 days. So looking at the last 48 hours of activity here, well, 3 days, last 3 days of activity, technically 48 hours here because we're not into the other day, shows the long duration M flare that popped off here, as noted a couple days ago, and we've seen a couple more M flares popping up within that time frame. But man, this one earlier that popped off produced a very long M duration or long duration M flare, and subsequently followed up by another strong M flare during that long duration event. Right now, currently though, as we speak, we're kind of back into the C level of the X-ray flare class, but don't let your guard down here. I think we're watching. I think we need to be watching this specific sunspot that's going to be facing Earth, 3089. I think that one harbors a pretty good chance of producing possibly an X flare. There's a lot of intermixing here, a lot of complexity of the magnetic field, and when you get all these reds, the yellows, the greens, everything, all blues all mixing in together, you create a soup, so to speak, of potential when it comes to a large flare. So watch that pretty closely. Looking at this image right here, this was put out 8/29/03, so it's pretty current. There's that bad boy 3088. It won't go away. It's still waving its hand, producing flares as we speak. But this one right here is the one we got to watch pretty closely in terms of it being pretty much geo-effective. Things like this. Sometimes when we get these stronger flares, they do pose a hazard in terms of what happens here on Earth. These solar flares are basically giant. They're giant explosions that burst out energy towards the Earth and sometimes away from the Earth of light, high-speed particles into space. And these things are they're huge. They're basically the largest explosions that are happening within this solar system. A lot of radiation being sent, and these X flares can do a little bit of damage here on Earth, folks, when it comes to the power grid and whatnot, if they are specifically Earth directed and they blast off a significant amount of energy and particles with that CME in the Earth directed view, Earth directed direction, I should say. So watching it pretty closely. We are again advancing towards solar maximum here in 2025, right around July 2025. We're expected to peak out. So we got a couple years here before we, call it the maximum. But we're already ahead of schedule in terms of the prediction levels with sunspots and the typical flare activity that we're seeing. We're already way ahead. So I'm pretty excited to see what's going to happen as we go into the months and the years ahead. Okay, now looking at the coronal hole activity, this is pretty awesome here. Remember that one sunspot here that was kind of right in the middle of that coronal hole? Well, it's now kind of evolved by itself and pushed off the coronal hole itself in this direction. It's kind of outlined. You can kind of see it. That one is kind of facing Earth a little bit, although on the south side. I think this will affect our 3-day geomagnetic forecast. And there's a couple other coronal holes. This one is center disk of the sun. That one will be definitely Earth-directed, number 20. So we're watching a couple coronal holes along with some major flares popping off here. And the solar weather department is getting super, super active right now. And again, we are entering the solar maximum, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty exciting. And I'll take this any day over a boring solar weather day. All right, so right now, 99% chance of a C flare. M flare stands at about 55% chance, and X flare elevated to 25% chance. They're kicking off, well, they're actually keeping the proton event right around 50% chance, but looking at the DRAP map, I don't see any of the protons there at the higher latitudes or the polar region, so to speak, where we would expect to see that proton event kind of show up there. A little bit different category when it comes to protons versus the solar flare. Right now, it's not happening. We're just seeing the solar flare activity along with some high frequency blackouts over the Western Pacific. Looks like the Philippines, Japan area right now. Let's see. So the 3-day geomagnetic forecast kind of coming and going here. They did classify a G1 class storm, or forecasted a G1 storm tonight. That didn't happen. So that glancing blow that we were kind of expecting from a prior CME is no longer, according to the KP index right now. Pretty minimal. So that missed us. But there is still potential. Looks like they're still kind of forecasting a little bit more elevated activity here over the next 24 hours. So we'll watch for that. 70% chance of certainty at the higher latitudes that this will take place. So again, that's all depending on where the CME and the charged particles and whatnot have gone. Kind of hard to exactly predict it, but that's what they're forecasting. All right, let's move on to earthquake activity. Yellowstone National Park. Super volcano up there in northwestern Wyoming. Still kind of shaking its thing there. Kind of popping off some earthquakes. Nothing spectacular. No big events going on, but this is day number 4. Getting into day number 5 of the earthquake swarm that's ongoing here. I mean, looking at this, just looking at this last 24 hours of earthquake activity, probably got a good 80, 90 or so earthquakes on this graph. And a lot of them are microquakes, and a lot of them are very small, including some of these little bitty ones here, folks. Some of these little ones where the finger is. But there's still earthquakes, right? It's still part of the earthquake swarm. So day number 4, getting into day number 5 of the earthquake swarm there at Yellowstone National Park. We haven't seen any major events. In fact, the USGS is only showing, let's go ahead and bring in here the map here real quick of Yellowstone. This is the all magnitude. So technically, the USGS has their instruments, all their computers, all the preliminary earthquake data reporting system here that gets sent out to the public, set at 2.5 and above is what I've kind of come to the conclusion of. They're not showing any of these microquakes, but they could possibly come Monday. We'll see what happens here. Getting a little notification here right now of another M flare coming in. Oh yeah, look at that. Another M flare popping off right now, and it's spiking like crazy. Look at that. Let's see exactly where this is coming from. I can only guess. Probably coming from our dear friend off on the southwestern limb. Although these images right now, I can't really tell because they're about 10 minutes behind. Can't really tell exactly where this is coming from. But the spacecraft and whatnot are reading the elevated conditions as far as the solar flare activity goes right now. And it is spiking up there into the mid-M level. We'll watch this, and we'll get a report at the end of this video. But as far as Yellowstone activity goes, folks, most of this activity obviously below 2.5 and below, but it's still ongoing. So Yellowstone swarm continues. We'll wait for the report on Monday, see if they include all those microquakes there. Come on, USGS, we're kind of counting on you. All right, some activity across the Devil's Mountain Fault area, across Victoria and along the Strait of Juan de Fuca, up around the Vancouver Island ranges. Seeing a little swarm of activity across that fault system. Ooh, man. Okay, we just got a notification of a large earthquake striking out in Indonesia right now. Stand by for a second here. Man, pretty active. Very active night right now, I'm telling you. Space weather active. Plate tectonics active. That could be kind of go hand in hand, right? So I'm surprised EMSC is not showing it right now. Oh, there we go. Up here, 6.3 in the Indonesia area 8 minutes ago. Now, I'm not seeing it up there on the map. It looks like it is into the Java Trench, and this area can see some mega quakes. Looks like about 40 kilometers deep. Source parameters have not yet been reviewed by a seismologist. USGS, I don't believe, has reported it yet. This is just coming in onto the... it just barely hit the live seismographs right now. But that 6.3 kicking off here looks like around the... let's see exactly where that's at. Let's go to the maps here and check this out. Yeah, right at the northern end of the Java Trench. Again, not super deep, about 40 kilometers or so within that region. But wow, for 6-pointer in a while. We'll wait for the USGS to kind of figure that out. Again, this is basically a computer system here from the EMSC. It was felt in the Indonesia area, 6.3 magnitude earthquake, about 9 minutes ago. And we'll wait. Actually, it looks like it's shown up there on the map. 40-kilometer depth, not yet been reviewed. So we'll wait, okay? We'll wait for that. Let's go back to Let's go back to the earthquake activity map, and we'll double check those couple events here in a little bit. West Coast activity did have some movement way out here off the coast of Oregon at 3.3 earlier this afternoon into the Blanco fracture zone. Not a big earthquake, but a little bit of movement out there in the Pacific. California activity, aside from the Calpine operations up there around the Clear Lake volcanic fields, Bay Area kind of kicking up in movement right now. Just off the San Andreas fault system into the Calaveras fault zone, extending north towards San Jose. We are noticing a little swarm of activity, a little independent swarm here. Got about 16 earthquakes near the Lake Isabella area, Bella Vista region. Largest earthquake so far looks to be a 3.5, and followed up by quite a few little microquakes in that little swarming activity. So we'll watch that. That is off of the, not for certain which fault system that occurred on. USGS not showing a whole lot of faults here on this map, but we'll look into that here in a little bit. Mammoth Lakes area, Long Valley supervolcano got some earthquake activity as well, although most of this very small and older activity. Southern California got one earthquake here off the San Andreas Fault, the southern end of it. 1.4. No major swarms to report there in Southern California. Big island of Hawaii. Let's go ahead and check this out real quick here. One earthquake out around the Kilauea volcano, right smack dab in the crater. 2.1 there at Kilauea volcano at 0.8 kilometers. So things continuing there within that region with the continual eruption stage. Pahala still seeing their typical swarm. No major adjustments there at any of the volcanoes currently. Aside from the recent activity that's still not shown up here on the map, Fiji Islands area, right around the southern end of the Philippines, major uptick in activity. And we're talking about some deep movement earthquakes here in the Fiji Islands area. The latest quake within this vicinity, a 5.6 into the Tonga Trench at 221 kilometers. Some pretty deep activity there over the last 24 hours. Around the Philippines, getting a swarm of activity into the Philippine Trench, and we're talking about some deep activity. It's been a while since I've seen almost a 600-kilometer deep earthquake within this region of the sea into the Philippine Trench area. That is some major adjustment going on down below the surface. And now, it's not a large earthquake, but something's brewing out here for sure. I've got a 4.4 at 595 kilometers. That's pretty deep. Java Trench, aside from the 6-pointer that we're kind of waiting on, I think it's going to be right around here, this little area. Obviously, we've seen a big push of movement here along this region, and that's going to ring true once we see that 6-pointer pop up here from the USGS map, or USGS catalog here pretty soon. And that's kind of expected here. We get this westward pressure movement here with the Pacific Plate. Although at the same time, all this deeper activity that we're seeing, not really relieving the stress out here along the west coast. Deeper activity, if anything, kind of adds back building strain, not only here along the eastern section of the plate, but also up here at the subduction zones themselves. The Alaska region, getting some activity continuing around the Trident volcano. I'm going to watch this closely, see if this develops into any further swarming, and see if the AVO, the Alaskan Volcano Observatory, put out any kind of updated status on this activity, because it's been ongoing for a little while. We're looking at a couple hundred earthquakes over the last 30 days. This is just the last 7 days of activity, and got about 113 or so on this map near the Trident volcano. The rest of Aleutian Trench seen some movement across the Gulf of Alaska, and also over here just shy. what have we got here? 828. That was from this morning time frame. 4.8 into the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. The majority of this area, the plate boundary, looks pretty quiet right now. Let's see what else we got. Tremor map tonight while we wait on the activity. Kind of spread out once again. This is pretty equally spread out into the Cascadia. Got a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. Along this area of the Cascadia subduction zone, 250 epicenters of tremor. It's a pretty good number. And this has been ongoing for a couple weeks or so. No major earthquake activity to report along the Cascadia, obviously, but with this movement, we have noticed a little bit of activity off the coast of Oregon. Got to remember the tremor activity does add further strain up here along the locked area. But when the locked area is further locked, so to speak, that strain can transfer further west here within this area, depending on how you look at it. But either way, regionally speaking, things definitely building up in pressure here along the western part of the states. All right, let's see. Let's go back to the solar X-ray chart here and see if we peaked out yet. Kind of looks like we're peaking out. Let's go to the 1 day. Yeah, we peaked out here right around the M3 point. Hey, look at that. M3.33. If you guys know me, 333 is like my number. That's crazy. So, latest M flare 3.33. Wow. Alrighty, so looking at the data, let me see. Yep, there we go. I mean, you can almost see this with certainty. When you get this brightness here on this graph, and you get that kind of camera glare, so to speak, on this imagery, you can almost tell exactly where that flare is coming from. And that is our dear friend 3088, which is now departing, has been departing here along the southwestern edge of the sun. But man, it won't give up. It won't give up. So we're looking at the high frequency radio blackout, obviously from this flare kicking off on the daylight portion of the Earth, and that right now is over the western Pacific, Philippines area, and coincidentally the Java Trench area. All right, again, let's check, see if the USGS has posted anything. It doesn't look like they've reported anything yet. So we'll go to the EMSC model and see if they've updated anything yet on their earthquake activity. Shown as a 6.1 in the Java Trench area of the Indonesia region. Has not yet been reviewed. A couple different errors there. Got a 6.3 or a 6.1. We'll wait for the USGS to report on that, but not going to wait all night. All right, guys, I'm going to bounce out of here. Again, things are getting very, very active in terms of earthquake activity and also solar flare activity. And the best thing you can do is be prepared. Definitely seeing quite a bit of activity out there around the Java Trench. Got hiccups all of a sudden. It never fails. And if anything changes, folks, we'll definitely provide an update out here. Till then, have a good night. Stay safe out there. And we will chat you guys a little bit later on. Look at Petrolia. Look at the Northern California coastline there. Kind of rocking and rolling a little bit there. That's the Petrolia station showing a little earthquake activity. So no doubt things are on the roll right now. We'll chat you guys here very soon.